Greetings, and thank you all so much for joining us this evening. My name is Cyrus Cohen, and I'm a programmer and the programming coordinator at NewFest, New York's leading LGBTQ media and arts organization. NewFest has been around for over 30 years, and you may know us best for our annual film festival, which will be going virtual this year for the first time as we celebrate our 32nd edition, which will be running from October 16th to the 27th. Passes are now on sale, and the full program will be announced on September 23rd. So visit newfest.org and gain access to over 100 films from around the world that shine a light on the full spectrum of the LGBTQ+ experience. This evening, we're celebrating Jessie Dunn Rovinelli's So Pretty for a virtual edition of our ongoing series, NewFest at the Center Presents. Before we begin, I'd like to thank Richard Morales and our partners at the LGBT Community Center for the work that they do to support too often marginalized communities and our year-round organization. This whole entire program of films at the center. I'm very excited to be showing So Pretty and have Jessie Dunn Rovinelli here with us. But yes, definitely check it all out and check out our film festival coming up. Before we introduce our honored guest filmmaker, Jessie Dunn Rovinelli, let's take another look at So Pretty.
This film tells of 4 young people attempting to organize their love. Their problem is that their love is already organized. Their love is organized in exclusivity, self-defense, and coupledom.
The situation is quite stressful. Paul and Erica look very different from the rest, and they feel it. Everywhere the youth are, we should be. In the bars, in the workplaces and offices, in the concerts and cinemas.
Hey, sweetie.
We should make sure the movement is everywhere.
Music.
Ah!
Hi, Jessie.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining us to talk about your phenomenal film. First, I would love to hear about how you came to this story and decided to pursue this adaptation the way that you did. It's very different from most other adaptations I've seen, both in how it actively comments on the adaptation, the text itself, and how you play with time, place, gender, and ideas that have been so central from when Schernikau wrote this novel to now, that there's still so much that has not been changed. So yeah, I would love to hear about how you came to the story. My long-winded question aside.
Yeah. I mean, so the impetus, the beginning was sort of very pure. Just, you know, I've read this book. I like this book. I was staying in Berlin with Thomas, who plays Franz in the film, shortly after the premiere of my first feature, a film called Empathy. And he was at a reading and an art show, and this book was being read, and his German wasn't so great, but it was good enough that he thought it seemed interesting. And he said, you know, your German's a little better at the moment, maybe you should give it a try. His German is now much better than mine, because he lives there now. And so I read it and I liked it, and you know, this was, you know, some amount of years ago. And then so I was, you know, kind of trying to consider what I would do for the second film, and I was playing around with making a short that sort of played off of the text of this book, because it was just always sitting there for me in like times of political or personal gender, just moments. For some reason, I kept coming to this book about, you know, faggots in Berlin, which wasn't my life. And somehow maybe that was more comforting, that it was distant enough that I could see myself in it, but it had enough of a divide that I could actually like use it rather than feeling too close. I just thought of that now though. So I was always sitting there. And then, yeah, I was like wandering around at some film festival, and I was sort of drunkenly explaining this short, and this woman told me it was going to be my next feature. So I, tried to keep my promises. So I listened to her and I made it my next feature. And then when I started doing it, that involved more research about Schernikau and the world that he lived in. And as soon as I became invested in that world, I decided it would be a disservice to both me and to him to simply translate it. And in the same way, that I was crossing certain boundaries of gender, time, place, nationality to talk to him. I wanted to put that process on screen rather than just a lie. It also gives us a history, right? Like, it's so easy to lose one's history. So to pick a history that wasn't even mine and to sort of claim it as mine, a gesture that, there are certain elements of Schernikau studies in Germany right now that would disagree with this moment and say this is not a film for somebody like me, or a novel for somebody like me. And so I didn't know that at the time, but I'm kind of glad that I did it anyway. So yeah, just this sort of like reaching through space. And then I tried to do the same thing with each of the participants in the film. So, you'll see the film is also an active communication with Adam de la Sesci, with Rachika Samarth, with Thomas Love, with Phoebe de Groot, these other actors in the film, who are acting. None of them are strictly playing themselves, but they're all communicating with they're also like navigating between their on-screen character, their off-screen lives, their interests, and so those sort of meet in the audio-visual texture of the film. So I don't know, it was just to sort of give myself a place, and the book was just something that had always helped me make sense of things. It's a book that, it's very, like, communism's good, which, I'm more of an anarchist than a communist, but I can admire the sentiment. But it also, like, it locates politics and how they hold themselves, and it like tries to declare communism here and now, or at least an image of it, like a fleeting shade of it. And that like felt really important, because it, film culture was moving too much to like these films that were like, this is bad, and this, finally people were aware that perhaps the American situation was bad, and the films, in my opinion, that were coming out in response to that felt, rather useless. And Schernikau gave me another way to approach that. Like, okay, rather than just like this denunciatory mode of something that obviously everybody thinks is bad or is not going to watch a fucking movie, I'm trying to like give towards a mode of like what exists now that could be a guide to the future. Yeah, so it helped me when I felt bad. So I thought, maybe it could do that.
Oh, thank you. That's a very brilliant answer. I really love hearing all of that. And it leads really well into my next question. You mentioned already Thomas Love and working together early on, and kind of thinking about the conceptualization of the project, and just brought up all the other actors. And I was curious how you came about finding everyone and knew they would work well together, that they would be so naturalistic. Because that, I mean, there's so much to gush over in your film that I would love to just rave about for hours. But that was something when I first started watching, I was so struck by, because it just felt so authentic, unlike anything I had seen in a very, very long time, particularly around trans community, that I thought initially was like, oh, I'm watching a documentary. I was like, no, this is a brilliant narrative feature that has managed to do something quite exceptional here. So yeah, how did you come across these people, and how did you know they would work together in the way that they do?
They were people who, in various ways, had come into my life and had like showed me ways of living. So none of these people are actors. Many of them are artists, or writers, or in other places. But they're all, they're friends. But I was the only person that like necessarily knew everybody else. So the community that you see on screen is not a real community. It's a lot of them know each other, but not all of them know each other, and many of them met, working on the film. But then the way that I work as a director is about like creating a space where it's not improvisation. I just try to create spaces that are as like low energy, and like low intrusion as possible, so that like it's easy to just sort of interact in a very low impact way. And and to like follow direction in a very low impact way. So I hope that made a space for them to meet each other. But I think it's also nice because everybody knows somebody, so nobody's in there blind. But they also all get that joy of meeting one another and sort of trying to build a life together on screen in the same way that the characters are.
I think that's really exceptional, both how you have brought in these non-actors and trusted them so much. But it's at the end of the day, because you're friends with them, you know that they're capable of this, and to have that faith in those around us who are not necessarily professionals in this field, but just handing over such a big part of yourself in this project to them, and them each giving bits of them back to you is quite beautiful.
And I wasn't supposed to be in the movie, to be clear. That was because somebody decided not to do it. Like, wow. Very, very, very soon before she.
You're a very, very talented actor. One would never know.
I was not supposed to be there,
but you know, sometimes things work out that way. It is for the best, ultimately. Because I do think that you add a lot, having that direct, authorial, directorial voice in the film. You were both accessing the emotions of the character much more directly than like a traditional writer-director would, and I think that's also part of why it has such a like soft, sensitive feel. Is you're in it just as much as any of the other actors are. It's not this like power dynamic of director actor. It is community based, which I think is quite brilliant and beautiful. Speaking of, you talked a bit about your on-set practices and low impact directing and setting, which I think is really fascinating. And I would love to hear more about how you kind of did this style of directing, and when you knew this is to give me the performances that I want. This is right.
I mean, I've already done, like, my first feature was a documentary with another person that I knew who, it was arguably more her idea to make the film than mine, and bless her for asking to do it. So it's a documentary about a friend of mine who was struggling with a heroin addiction, and was sort of moving from city to city across the U.S., surviving with sex work and trying to, access insurance or whatever. And the movie is like even slower than So Pretty. But we had it was really like lovely to work with her. She was incredible. And, we would just sit back and let the camera go for like 10 minutes at a time. And we would tell her what to do. It's not like a traditional documentary where, I mean, certain scenes were actually just verite, but a lot of it would be like, okay, well, we need you to do this. And so I discovered, with this non-actor playing, the part of the joke of that film is you trying to figure out how much of this is an honest portrayal of her life and how much of it is not. But regardless, like working with her, I discovered that it was really, really wonderful to direct someone in this way where, like, it's not like you're improvising. It's you have a thing that you have to do on screen, but it's kind of up to you how you do it, and I'll like stay with you. And I just like had a lot of joy in watching how people like activated and navigated space. Like they would like want this, like, and I realized you could get them to do stuff by like hiding something that they needed to like do a task off screen. So it's like, oh, you're gonna make coffee, so I'll hide like the coffee or the coffee maker over here, and then you have to go get it. And then I could get these like actions and these crossings and these paths without having to be so hands-on. So it's basically like making acting as little work as possible. Which is like incredibly hard. I don't mean to demean to like put down my performers or anything about like that. It's like I just want to like remove all the barriers to entry so that they can give me the freest way of inhabiting a space that they can. And that for me is where they actually are allowed to, like, to give them the space they're actually allowed to, like, how do I choose to inhabit this space?
And I think they succeed in a large part because of your direction and the freedom that you give them. So again,
it was weird though then to give it to myself. That was super weird. So I think you can see my character, like, she like kind of takes a director role and she's like trying to like urge people around, which I like.
I love that.
Like, can you get over here, Cass?
Inserting the director into the film itself. Brilliant. I would love to hear about some visual inspirations for the film. It just has such a unique style and tone and pace. And if there aren't any, I completely understand, because as I'm saying, it feels very new. And I wonder.
I try not to cite inspirations because I think it's so boring. I don't like this style of criticism where we like sort of like, point out the influences. But you know, certainly for framings, it's been, you know, everyone says Chantal Akerman about the film, and they're not wrong. But also the Austrian director Ulrich Seidel, who does these like actually very severe, very cruel documentary films, and I was wondering if I could be less like use his approach without this cruelty. And then Simon Liang's like approach to duration in play has always been fun. And these are very much like visual. They're like how I think about how I can like place a camera in terms of a space. And then there are other directors. A lot of times I'll see a visual approach that I don't like, and or like a film that I don't like, but I'm like, oh, this way of framing a shot is really lovely, and maybe I could use that. But yeah, I've always liked films that give like equal priority to bodies and to space, because I make movies where I like to see how people touch, and like I get very excited about the political possibilities of how somebody touches, or like horrors sometimes of how people touch. And it's very important to me that when they do that, you get to see like all of it. Like for me, this is a dance film. I was at a point too when I was making this where I wasn't doing so hot, and I really was like surviving in dance spaces. And so I thought I didn't even want to make the film. So the only way to make it was a dance film. So I just want to create a camera that will move through space in a way that it can dance. It does its own dance. They do their own dance, and they sort of meet. You know, the camera and the actors, they just dance alongside each other, and they're not necessarily dancing together either. They're just dancing, and we have enough space so we can see how people cross, where those dances cross, and that's what's exciting for me about
That's very fascinating to hear. I love thinking about this as a dance film. I'll be thinking about it all night, I'm sure. Like, revisiting.
Yeah, we worked with a choreographer. There's a choreographer who worked with us for every scene of the film.
Because movement is central, and both the camera movement and your actors' bodies in space. I fully see what you're saying. It's a different kind of dance, but it's 100% happening every second. So I really enjoyed that. And then I guess last question, as we're running out of time for me before we move over to audience questions. I'm curious to hear what your hot takes on contemporary trans cinema are and what you want to see moving forward.
I just want to see more films. I want to see more trans people making genre films. I want to see more trans people making films that are formal, are conceptual, are about something other than being trans. I think as much as I'm proud of this film, it's the first film I made after coming out, and it's certainly like transness is inescapable in the film, and I wonder if moving forwards I could continue to work with and hire trans talent both in front of and behind the camera without having to I think this film tries as a beginning to like take our bodies as a given and to move from there, and I wonder if I can go farther. So I want to see us working. So I actually don't want trans film to exist. I want trans film to die like right now. I want this to be the beginning and the end of the trans film movement, insofar as like I'm interested in trans representation from like a labor perspective. Like I want to see more people working at every level of production, from producers, directors, cinematographers, assistant camera gaffers, all the way down. And then I want enough people doing that so that like we're freed from the burden of like, it's awful that when I make a film, it carries the weight of like representing trans people. It's like me and Isabel Sandoval right now, and it's like the two of us should not be asked to like carry the representation of trans women in this country. That makes no sense. So mostly, yeah, that's that. And then I also just like really want I want trans people themselves to know that we are better than our own representation. Like when you make a film, I beg you, do not just make a film that says that you are like worthwhile. Of course you're fucking worthwhile. That's the most boring thing in the world. Like make a film that shows about how a specific trans person is like a wretch, like an utter wretch, just truly wretched human being. Like, of course you're worthwhile. And I don't want to make a cinema that's just to prove that to cis audiences. Like, what a waste of my fucking time. You know, I'm not going to be here very long.
No, I totally understand.
Anyway, yeah, that's my little rant on that.
And I'm jumping off of that. I would like to hear about thinking about audience and gaze, because one major element, again, of the film is that it does not like remotely cis audience, which is very refreshing for me after your Boys Don't Cries, your Crying Games, just the endless history of trans representation in cinema that is exclusively using us as objects of violence or as people who are seen as deceptive to kind of pull from Julia Serrano's perspectives. And to have a trans cinema that is not forced to be trans cinema, that is trans people living their lives, doing what one does, not necessarily living under a microscope and making every single bit of our identities in relation to our gender, because it's just one part of us. there's many more to each and every single trans person in the world than just their transness. Which is, yes, one part of So Pretty that I think is really exceptional is that you allow all of your trans characters to be people, to be messy, to be selfish and right and wrong and doing things that they want to do, that feel right to them in the moment, that and you never take any source of trauma and play it up for spectacle. Like, there's violence in the film, there are relationships that might not go perfectly in the film, but nothing is zeroed in on, torn apart, and presented as if it were the end of anyone's world, which is difficult in trans cinema when oftentimes violence is the end of one's world. And we do have, obviously, responsibility when it comes to representing a community, but like you're saying, not to have the entire weight of the whole entire trans community on your shoulders.
I think there's two questions in there. One about the gaze and one about what we display. In terms of what we display, like, this film is a lie. Like, it may, like, in some ways represent, you know, the way some people kind of live in Brooklyn, but, like, let's be real, and, you know, in reality, like, human beings are much, much crueler and more vicious and violent than the characters in these films. Like, I can't live with the level of generosity that these characters do. Mm-hmm. I strive to. I think there are moments where we do achieve that, but the film is like a gentle fantasy of now a little bit farther, and then you see also other bits of now, like, seeping in. Like, yes, this is a film where we don't have to see violence, certain forms of, like, state violence all the time, but they do appear. Like, these are things that threaten to rupture the little dream that the characters are constructing together. But I think that their dream is very lovely, and I think, you know, I've discovered too, for cis audiences, it's a nice dream. I think it's a place we'd all like to.
Yeah,
many of us would. And then as to the gaze, like, I reread, like, I always liked the female gaze. Like, this is this book where Laura Mulvey invents this term, like, sorry, not the female gaze, the male gaze, where she invents the term the male gaze, and she says cinema is always assumes that the viewer is a man, so when you look down the eye of the camera, you're seeing from a hypothetical man's perspective, and she's actually not wrong. The essay is really good, and it's much more, like, actually practical about how we actually watch movies and where the camera's positioned than people take it to mean. Like, now it's become this hyperbolized thing, where it's like, cinema is man. I'm like, well, no, she actually gives you a lovely set of ways for the way you could actually switch the hypothetical viewer. And you'll see, like, certain examples in contemporary cinema where people try to create a female gaze, and in my mind, it's a bit hokey. So it was more fun to me to, like, make a film of many gazes, where the gaze, it's way back. The gaze, like, assumes the position of, like, it's like the camera gaze, if anything. It sits back and allows them to present before the camera, but it's still like a sexualized gaze. The idea is that this gaze always carries an element of eroticism, of a desire to see bodies. Like, when you go to a cinema, you want to see a body, and, like, generally speaking, like, humans find other humans' bodies arousing in some capacity. And so this is a film that tries to, like, allow that to happen, but in a way where the characters can do that with a bit more distance. So they can challenge, they can flirt, they can cruise the camera. They have these a wider variety of ways of engaging, but also without, like, losing or denying that eroticism of the camera. Like, you know, I think my friends are cute.
I'm sure your viewers would agree. And so now I believe that we're ready to go on to audience questions, if anyone has anything. So Hill Patel says, you capture Brooklyn so well. Did you always know what locations you wanted to shoot at, or what was the location scouting process?
No, actually, location scouting was a lot of work. That's a great question. Thank you for that. Yeah, I don't think a single location that I had in mind in the beginning ended up happening. We got super lucky. A friend of mine had rented a new apartment that had multiple rooms in those frames, and I'm obsessed with frames. So most of the action is shot in an apartment that somebody had not yet moved into, really. So we were able to take like some of their stuff and our production designer and work together. So that saved us a lot of money. So they like, but they chose to stay in the apartment, which is really foolish of them. So they were like sleeping in like the basement or something. I don't know. It seemed really miserable. I told them not to do that, but they wanted to.
Lessons learned.
Yeah, and so now, like, we end up shooting in Bossa Nova because, other venues were less interested. And I'm actually really happy that it was Bossa because I think these spaces that bodies like the characters in the film inhabit that are not explicitly for them, but they make for them, are kind of more interesting than the spaces that are more explicitly for them. Bossa Nova Civic Club is a techno club in Bushwick that is a cliche and a wonderful place. And then the park, we had a producer who was like trying to find us a park that we could set up enough track to do this long closing shot in the film. And it turns out this is a park up at the top of Manhattan, Inwood Park, that I didn't like once.
I recognized it. I was like, okay.
Yeah, it's a great park, and it's everything that I wanted. I didn't care like what park it was, as long as I could get like metal coming through the trees. So you have this like very green space, and then you have like proper city like sort of interjecting on itself. So I was so happy when we were able to get. The park ranger we worked with there was really great. So I love you. What was his name? I used to like him explicitly by name at most Q&As, but it's been a while. So I'm sorry, Park Ranger, I've forgotten your name. You were great.
I'm sure it will be appreciated.
He's in the comments somewhere, I think.
We can go
yes,
on.
No. Yeah.
We have one from Molly, Swingerland. I know the film has screened at many top festivals that you've also attended. Is there anything audience members at those screenings come up to you and shared after that has resonated most with you?
I have to say, like, I'm very skeptical about political filmmaking. I think it's a thing that filmmakers like to tell themselves so they can get off the hook for doing something actually risky. But then it's nice to see people happy. So it means a lot when folks come up, which we can't do now, which is a real bummer. And, I don't know. I think if anything, just like seeing audiences react to the film has made me a bit more naive about what it means to see my body and the bodies of the other actors on film. That's nice. Thanks for crying, everybody. I love it when you cry. It really breaks my heart and makes me so happy. I'm really glad. But actually, one of the sweetest things was, I'm sorry to out you, young girl. There was like a young viewer who like slipped me a note about how she really liked that the women in the film had body hair, and that made her feel like she didn't have to shave her body hair. And I just loved so much that she had skipped over, like, this was a cis woman, and I just really love that she like was able to skip over all this movie. Like, that's what it came down to for her, was like the body hair. And I was like, that's great. I don't think anyone was even really thinking about that. I just like lesbians, so like I think armpit hair is really sexy. So there's really not like any kind of consideration there going on, other than like I personally think armpit hair is hot. And that just really like broke me. I was like, oh my god, that's wow. I'm so glad that you have the encouragement to not shave your armpit hair because of like this film and not some other film. That's really sweet. Thank you. Anyway, sorry.
No,
I just feel I'm apologizing to her for like breaking her privacy there, but I didn't name you or give a country, so I think she's off the hook. But if you're out there watching, that was really sweet.
And I'm sure this person is, then they'll also feel like important to them as well. Wow.
Yeah, I thought that was really great. Yeah. And then there's a lot of feedback about how the film isn't materialist enough and it's too much of like a dream and like doesn't represent proper communism. And I actually just am like so sick of this fetishization of a particular image of communism. I'm like, girls, it is not 1968 anymore.
Communism.
Part of the point of this was like deliberately doing it wrong. And so that one kind of frustrates me, but at the same time, I understand and I wonder, like, I don't know. I'm still wrestling with this. Like, to what degree do we have to show like images of struggle in order to convey like political futures? I don't know. I'm still torn. I appreciate everyone that brings it up. I'm not sure that I agree, but I don't know. I'm like, also, if you're bringing it up and you're responding to something that I did very intentionally, then it means it worked on some level. I don't know. That's an interesting one that I just keep mulling around. If anybody else wants to like throw out a new spin on that question of proper Marxist materialism, have at it. I promise not to be mean. I hope that didn't seem mean. Anyway, sorry.
Oh, you're so good. I love that. And I think it definitely, you feel that in the film. Like, it's not aspiring to be any idealized version of anything. Like, nothing is supposed to be, this picture perfect box of this is what communism should look like. This is what anarchism should look like. This is what transness should look like. This is what healthy relationships should look like. Like, no, it's complicated. And these are issues that the characters
But there is the fear of falling into like idealizing a certain form of Brooklyn living as being like transferable to universalism. And I don't think that.
I don't think
we
our
cannot all live like that, and nor should we.
But I think we're ready for the next audience question now. Anthony LaRusso, very cool script, awesome editing and pacing, hypnotic, it's very streamlined. I haven't read the book, but want to. How did you choose which parts of the book to dramatize?
Unfortunately, you can't read the book unless you speak German. It is still untranslated, but currently Thomas Love is working with another, with his boyfriend on a translation of the novel, which has the blessing of Verbrecher Verlag in Germany. So hopefully, write to your local publisher of translated German, international texts and ask them to please buy this translation. I think they have like the first couple of chapters or something ready. So maybe that'll actually happen.
But going back to
in terms of dramatizing, it's basically the first half of the book. And then I kind of sum up the second half of the book in a handful of scenes that are sort of like my very, very free riff on it. But it's actually quite faithful. I reread the book like 6 months ago because I felt like I should. And I was kind of shocked. I was like, oh, wow, this is really like verbatim. Like even like the plastic clear sheet in the shower. I had like forgotten that I dragged that detail right out of the book, but like that's in there. So good on my production designer for catching that. Production designer Mira Sakura was really just incredible. She's great. Everybody should work with her. So yeah, I was really like reading the book and just like pulling moments and images like this plastic sheet, I guess, that I forgot about that resonated. But then they're kind of like mixed up. Some of it's out of order. I changed. I have two characters like switch positions, like the character of Erica and Paul, like they do what the other's supposed to do in the novel. It worked better, and also like a lot of it is like deliberately wrong. So some of the translations are wrong intentionally. Sometimes because like my German was bad and I just liked my wrong translation, and sometimes it's intentional. And then so it goes in and out, but the beats are all pretty faithful. Pretty faithful to the book.
Wonderful. Maeve Murphy, I love your work so much. Do you have any upcoming projects in the works?
Yeah, so I just shot a short in May, which is done, and it will be premiering at the Berwick Media and Film Festival in Berwick, United Kingdom, which is unfortunately geo-blocked, so that will only be for UK audiences at this time, but hopefully it will be coming to American theaters at some point. It's a short. It's designed to be seen in theaters, so you might actually be better off if we are allowed back in theaters to see this one. But it's intended to be projected on 35mm, and it is it's called Marriage Story, and it is sort of like an investigation of the sort of religious language of love between women and Christ and between women and women. That it's also like an autofiction playing off of my own life and my real life romance. So the script is written by Annika Cash, and it features our naked bodies and a lot of the color red and some lovely techno.
Just jumping off of that, I would like to touch on the color palette of the film briefly. If we have another audience question, we can do that instead. But given that you brought up just the ideas for the next film, it feels like such a separation from this, which is super soft, very gentle colors. Overall, at least. I mean, you get to the very end in the club scene, and in some of those moments, then color can get a little bit darker, a little bit more intense. But overall, you do strike a lighter tone here. I'm curious.
Yeah. If anything, the new one, it's we worked with those lights that you see lighting the club scenes throughout this film. Just a lovely set of lights that I really enjoy working with. So I kind of made a film about what happens when I leave those on the red setting and have them go on and off. So it's really kind of just an extrapolation of that last scene, but everything in the short is very domestic, as with this. So nothing's really changing. But I guess the two modes of my filmmaking in the next short will
come together. Yeah.
Each other. But yeah, I work as a colorist. So color is really important to me. Like not like a film colorist, which is somebody whose job it is to match the colors from shot to shot. For those who might not know, of each film, and also come up with a color look for a film. So with this film, these are people who really like to wear colors, and that was sort of like threw me for a loop. So I kind of had to make a film around that. It's shot on 16mm, which comes with really nice skin tones baked in. But I'm also coloring it digitally, which is something that I really enjoy, digitally coloring 16mm film. So it was about like, I don't go so much into the idea that like particular colors represent particular emotions, but what I do like is that you can color space to a color, since this is a film, that you can key color to a particular space. And because this is a film about how people like interact in very specific rooms, it was really nice to be able to key each of those rooms. You have the red room, you have the white room, you have the blue room, you have the pink room. And those become like sort of comforting places to return to. It's also, again, this is dance film. It's structured like in the way that a lot of dance music is structured. So it's kick, 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 kick. And we'll use these rooms and these colors. The film is literally structured along like repeating certain shots and colors so that you have this repeated kick, which I think gives like the film a kind of like womb-like comforting space, and also like gets rid of some of the drama of scenes. And it's just like, you're waiting for that kick. You're waiting for that. But the other kick.
Good to see it. Do keep us updated about when it might be available.
That was not so pretty, though, to be clear. Everything I just said. The new film also has a kick, but it's explicit. It's an actual kick drum.
Appreciate the clarification. But yes, I believe that we're all done with our audience questions. So thank you so much for stopping by, having a nice little conversation about trans representation. Thank you so much for making this movie. Again, it meant quite a lot to me, and I'm sure it meant a lot to our viewers as well. And I'm just thrilled to see what you do next.
Thank you. It was really lovely. I really enjoyed it.
Wonderful to hear.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us.
And do remember, the festival is running from October 16th to 27th. Get your passes on sale right now, and I'll see you there. All right. Bye.